Hello, my name's Hayley Noakes, and this next video related to time management is about researching more effectively. So, for a start, it's a good idea to do smart research rather than a huge amount of research. It's very tempting when you get an essay question to go straight to the library and get out lots of books on that subject area. It's really better to start small and build out in like a spider's web from there. So use the bibliographies of the things that you've already read to find new pieces of research that are related to that subject area. So what you're looking for is those one or two key articles or chapters that are specifically related to whatever subject area it is you're researching. Who have they referenced? And then go from there and build out that way. That way then you're building up, as I said, a web of research rather than lots of different unrelated pieces that you're not quite sure might not be relevant. And you can use Google Scholar to do this. I'm not going to go into a great detail about how to use Google Scholar here because we have a separate whole video on that, step-by-step instructions on the features and functions of Google Scholar. But Google Scholar, if you've never used it before, is a search engine that searches peer-reviewed journals and chapters that you can reference in your essays. So from there you can use lots of different keywords and it searches lots of databases. It's a bit like the databases that you might use in the library, except that it's bigger than that. But obviously by being bigger than that it also comes up with sometimes a huge amount of research, so sometimes it's difficult to navigate through that and it does take some time to sift through. But there are lots of ways that you can use advanced searches by limiting the time of the publication to, say, the last couple of years, because you should be including classic and current literature in your essays. Classic literature would be things that have been published within sort of the last 20 years or so that might be pioneering pieces of research that have led to very sort of upheld ideas in your field that you'd be expected to reference. But you also need to have the current literature in there, what's currently going on in the field, so things that have been published within the last sort of 3 to 5 years or so, so that then you've got a mixture of the two. If you have an essay that's just full of classic literature, then you're not taking into account the new developments that might have happened in your subject area. If you're only concentrating on current literature, you're in danger then of perhaps maybe focusing on ideas that might be considered a bit fringe already. You have to remember what it takes to become a robust theoretical idea in these subject areas. You need to have reams and reams of evidence to support a theory for it to be considered robust. You take the theory of evolution, has a huge amount of evidence and literature to support it, so we take it as being almost fact. But obviously in the sciences we only ever have really good theories supported by lots of evidence, rather than talking in terms of we are proving something or fact that doesn't really exist. But that's what you're looking for, so in your classic literature. And in your first year the likelihood is that your tutors are wanting you to be able to get a good grasp of that classic literature. What are the main ideas that are important in a particular field? And there will be lots and lots of sort of recent research that might still be testing those ideas, that they might be testing certain parts of them, bringing in a slightly different method, maybe they've got a slightly different idea. So really research is about modifying things that have already been done. Very rarely will you find anybody that comes up with something totally new and pioneering. Everything that's researched is based on something that has been done already mostly. So you need a mix of the two. And the good thing about the current literature is that if you find a journal article published on something that you're researching that's been published very recently, what they'll have in their introduction is a good overview of where the field is at. So in the last 20 odd years or so, where are we currently at? What is the idea of what we all tend to believe in that subject area at the moment, or what are the best, most plausible theories at the moment? And from there you can then go and have a read of those from the bibliography, have a read of those authors and ideas that they're mentioning in there. You can also set up citation alerts. You can do this via Google Scholar, or you can do this via your journal host sites like Science Direct or Elsevier, those places where you go and get your online journals. So if you find one that's particularly good for your subject area, then you can set up an alert for it, so that if anyone else recently publishes any work, it will send you an email and say, yep, someone's published something that's cited that piece of that journal article that you think is particularly interesting. Likelihood is it may be related to your subject area, and that's more applicable for longer term research projects, like things over a year long, or you're doing a dissertation perhaps, because you think about when you first start researching, it could be like over a year in advance. When you become to writing up, you might find a couple of other articles that might be particularly pertinent or add an interesting stance to your theories might have been published since then. It's a good idea to stop reading earlier and do more planning. It's often easy to keep reading and reading and reading, and then we end up with so much that you're not quite sure what to do with all of that reading. It's better to do a mixture of the two. Read a bit, plan a bit, write it down, read a bit, plan a bit. You can always fill in the gaps and do more reading. What you end up with when you do too much reading is procrastination. It's probably because you're not really quite sure where you stand. You haven't taken the time to think through what you've read and how it's related together. If you do that as well, then you can see early on sort of where your ideas stand and how they fit in. So planning in your own mind map is important there as well, so you can then try and develop a good structure to your assignment. It's important as well that if you don't understand something, is to take a step back and go back to the basics. There's nothing wrong with Googling a topic area if you're really unsure about what constructivism or feminism actually means to your subject area. Just Google it, you get a basic overview. You wouldn't cite from many places like that, but you can pick up keywords and actually often key authors that you can then use perhaps maybe in your Google Scholar databases to help you go forward with that. So don't be afraid of going back to the basics or a first year textbook that you wouldn't necessarily be using for references in your third year, but have a look there to get a brief overview. It's basically learning to walk before you can run. If you find yourself finding it difficult to critically discuss a subject area, to really think about, is this idea plausible or not to explain this certain phenomena? If you're having difficulty to do that, it's probably because you don't have a really clear idea in your mind about what actually is being argued there, what is being proposed. So going back to basics is a good idea. And this is why always when you're taking notes, you should always try to put things in your own words as well. It's all too easy to copy out lots of quotations and put them in your essay, but your tutors will see through that because it will seem like your essay is disjointed and you're not really sure about what everyone is actually saying. So, a bit about reading skills. So you've got all this research, so it's about strategic reading skills as well. So again, we can go to the library and sit there for 9 hours and hope that we're going to do lots of reading, but actually it's about doing little and often and spending less time reading but getting more effective note out of it. So, as I said before, select what you will read from a range of current and classical material, and also select relevant sections as well. You might have a book, but you don't have to read the whole thing. Within a journal article as well, you might not actually be interested in the methodology and the actual results of what they've found out, but the discussion and the introduction and the conclusion are what you're interested in. So use the contents list, the chapter headings, introductions, to select what it is that you actually want to read. And also it's about recognising the meaning of connecting words such as therefore and however and in contrast. If you go through a journal article and you highlight those words initially, sort of skimming it, you can then see the structure of their argument. It's good to emulate that kind of thing in your own assignments, but also for you to pick out, well, what actually is this person arguing here? And you should always have that question in your head when you're reading. What are they trying to sell me? They're all trying to sell you something, an idea. And you need to be able to explain to somebody like me or like your tutor or like a colleague, what actually are they trying to explain here, and those should be forming the basis of your notes. So look for leading statements as well. So there are 4 main areas. The key issues are, especially in your current literature, if you look for those in there, again, what you're trying to do is build up sort of an overview umbrella picture of what has gone on in the last 20 odd years or so in that subject field. What's current? What does everyone believe? Yes, 30 years ago or so, everyone believed that Freud's explanations for so-and-so were true. But now we've done more research and we're actually the field is swaying towards a more person-centred therapy area. So thinking about your field, what happened, what's going on now, what's current, and that's what your tutors are looking for. You're not expected to necessarily, as I said, come up with sort of all new pioneering ideas, but what you are expected to do is be able to understand basically what's going on in your subject area and how those ideas are related together. So I think the word plausible is probably the most useful word to you. Which of these ideas, you've got a phenomena, that's what most researchers do, you've got a phenomena that's happening, either the way people behave or the way bacteria is behaving or why this government is in power. You've got a phenomenon that's happened, and we've got to think of there are lots of arguments as to why that might be the case. So you've got to think about the plausibility of each of those arguments, and that's really what critical thinking is. But we will be having a whole video section on developing your critical thinking skills, so you can refer to that. Okay, so, and as well, as I mentioned before, it's about your reading framework, so have relevant questions in your mind when you're reading. It helps keep that reading active rather than sort of reading and just trying to pick out things that you hope are going to be relevant. So those questions like, what are they trying to sell me here? What are the main key issues? Where is the evidence? Where is the counter-argument? Having just a couple of those questions in your mind helps focus your reading, so then you're actually getting what you want out of it, rather than lots of superfluous information that might not be relevant to you. Okay, so here is a little video on increasing your reading speed that you might find useful. Okay, so yeah, just a few tips there on how to help you increase your reading speed, and of course there are a huge amount online that you can have a look at as well, but it's finding what technique is right for you is quite useful, and it's more about effective reading. Don't think, oh, I have to read a huge amount. It's about reading selectively and getting what you want out of that reading. So a little bit on note-taking now as well. Always make sure you're taking notes during the lectures and when you're reading as well. These form the basis of what's going to go into your assignments and what you're going to be revising as well. But as I mentioned before, condense those into cue card form. Often you can be left with reams and reams of notes or highlighted text, and actually then that doesn't become very useful. What you can do is take notes of your notes and try and get a more and more and more condensed form. Because what you want to be able to do in your assignments is to be able to have several ideas that you've paraphrased into nice sentences. So it's the processes of taking and retaking note that is active, and that's what increases your learning. So don't see it as sort of wasted time taking notes and retaking them. That's active revision that you should be doing every week, which means that when you do come to taking exams or doing your assignments, you'll have retained a whole lot more information that enables you to be able to outline to your tutors that you know these theories and what you're talking about, but also the more you know, the more able you are to think deeply and critically reflect on what it is you're learning. It's a good idea to read without a pen in your hand as well. It's very easy to read something and take down notes. So read without a pen in your hand, read whole paragraphs or whole sections before you take any notes. So read the whole introduction before you take any notes, because otherwise you just end up taking so many notes you ended up with 6 or 7 pages of notes, and again, as I said, that's not all that useful. If you do find yourself repeatedly doing that, then as I said, read those notes, then take notes of those notes, and give yourself just a cue card to be able to take down the main points for your whatever it is you're reading, and look for the conclusions and note these down, because that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for what are they actually arguing here, rather than all the extra information that they might be outlining. For the purposes of their journal article, that might be important, but for you want the bones of the argument. You don't want all the flesh as well. Okay, so although that's not directly related to time management, you'll find that this process of planning and reading and note-taking effectively is about how you can use your time effectively and not waste it on taking superfluous notes or reading too much reading or spending lots of time procrastinating, basically because you haven't broken down your essay question and you're not sure what you're going to do. So our next video is going to be talking about how to deal with procrastination.